Thank you for tuning in to Stampscaping 101. This is the largest scene that I've ever done at 11 by 17 inches. It's a two full-page spread, kind of tabloid-sized piece. And it's focusing around the autumn imagery here in conjunction with some of the island stamps for the most part. But a lot of time spent on this just from the sheer scale of it, but not too much of a process differentiation between standard quarter size pages and larger size. I found that my fingers got a little bit kind of inkier, just from the sheer handling of this and always kind of turning around to access areas to apply the color. But kind of the same spirit and a lot of the same kind of considerations that went into it, except you're just using a lot more ink and whatnot. And there's a lot more space in here, to kind of play around with and, I don't know, to layer and to utilize, larger portions of some designs in, kind of repetition in many cases. So a lot of fun to do. And if you choose to watch it, I hope you enjoy it. And if you have any questions, just drop us a note in the comments section. Okay, I am back again, and to the viewers of this channel, if you just so happen to be watching, I don't know, these videos all the way through, thank you very much, but also apologies for how they've been ending so abruptly. I'm just completely losing track of time, and the video cards are filling up, so or my secure digital memory card in the camera, so it just ends and says memory full, and it's kind of always been a shock to me during this whole process here, because I completely lose track of time when working on these, and I don't know, time flies when you're having fun, I guess. Alright, so just kind of looking back at this after letting it sit, and I think I can always go a little bit brighter in some areas. So here's a fluorescent yellow. Wow. Alcohol pen. This one's Shuttle Art. And adding that into these areas, it's not going to look, fluorescent yellow, but layered over the top of this, all these other colors, it will form and read as kind of a nice bright, I don't know, probably more of an undertone than anything. Okay. Now I'm going to kind of avoid some of the lighter areas in here because I don't want that super bright tone just kind of on its own, but I do want some brightness and some of that glow that this can form in some of these areas, okay? But I don't want it to be so kind of like in your face, so to speak, color. But look at that. See that? How it's kind of, I don't know. It's standing out a little bit more. Now, you probably don't have like a fluorescent green color unless you happen to have one of these. I don't know how many people like buy the Copic, fluorescent colors. Maybe you do. I don't know. I don't think it's one of those that typically would come in a pack, a set pack. That maybe it does or something like that. But any kind of yellow green would be great, or a yellow. If you're layering it over greens and whatnot, it'll form some kind of nice bright tone. Okay, let's testing it out in some of these darker areas as well. Surprisingly, it kind of, I don't know, it is quite visible. Surprisingly so in some of these even darker areas. I was hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park, and I forgot, at a certain elevation, it's called the Tundra, I think. And I was just, reading some little interpretive maps, along this little trail, and talking about lichen, and just how old some of it is. I don't think it's ancient. I thought it said something that lives like 75 years or something like that. From what I recall, I don't think it was much older than that, but still, pretty old. Or at least in that area of the park. I don't know if it's the same for, for the desert, and areas and whatnot, different regions, but up there was something like that. Okay, this is coming out pretty nice. I don't know, I'm kind of getting a little bit more bold. I don't know if I'd use like a fluorescent yellow in a lot of my scenes before, but kind of just sparingly like this. I'm kind of just drawing these little squiggles or circles, dots maybe within the space. It's kind of bringing it alive a little bit. It's also glowing. I don't know how this would look under like a black light if it's that, strong, but I don't know. It's pretty apparent in here. So, all right. Question always is how much do you want to use? All right. See, this is the type of thing that's having, I can kind of show you here, like these sets like this. 88, I think it's 88, 88 colors, shuttle art 88. 88 colors, $40. But that's the type of color that I don't see myself using a lot. Maybe I'll use it more now, I don't know. It looks great up there, but, kind of having these somewhat inexpensive sets, just, you can play around with colors that, I don't know, you might not use very often. But it's still kind of nice to have. Alright, this is the apple green Marvy Le Plume Permanence. Kind of just incorporating that in. It's not as bright. That fluorescent yellow really stood out rather well. They call it this, when you're doing this with a paint brush, it's called scumbling. So I'm kind of scumbling on here. Okay. Let me see about some additional pen work. My shuttle art white. I'm not sure if it's working. Maybe it is, I can't tell. It's so light and translucent. Okay, so kind of going back in and reiterating some highlights with white here, because I want to kind of re-establish. All right, let me move my pens out of the way. I need space on my table. I need to reestablish some of the the finer details in the design of like these trees in here, okay? I've lit them in a certain way in the design so that you can kind of see the trunks, okay? So you can see them, you can see that little light right there, but I need to reestablish that like this. Okay. You don't need to do it all the way everywhere, but it adds that kind of element of a kind of a crisp element back into the scene, and it kind of reiterates lighting, of course. So it's kind of, yeah, it doesn't. You see what I mean? Everything here kind of, you know, in order to achieve all that rich color, it does that, but then it can get a little muddled in there when you don't see some of the finer details. So this is just kind of going in. Don't try to do everything. It's just kind of like a more of a suggestion, you know, of a line. You don't have to line all the way up the tree. Just kind of put a little, you know, little thing like that. It doesn't have to be exact either. But see, I've kind of done that up here in the trees, okay? And then where you see this little area down below, reiterated in the not the shadows, but the reflections, like that, and see how that really kind of reestablishes that, and it just, to me, it looks more dimensional that way. So, you know, that little, just little highlight, okay? And I've done that in the water as well. I've drawn it into the design, but you just need to just go in there and just slightly reestablish it, not fully. I mean, you could, but you know, you don't have to. Yeah, so the area down here, it's really kind of muddled. There's that leafless tree that I stamped down here. I'm just kind of going over some of the branches on it a little bit. Okay, let's see. I'm going to go and put a few highlights on some of these tree branches. This near tree. So we'll kind of bring the same type of spirit of highlighting in the foreground, okay, that we've established in the background. Doesn't have to be over every limb either, like I said. Adding some highlights on some of the trees. Okay, now I stamped out a lot of these red bushes down here yesterday, and I thought later on, you know, it'd be kind of nice to give them a little bit of variation. So we'll use some colored gel pen work on those. Okay, so we have some red down in here. Let's see, I thought I bought a real reddish... Let me grab a couple pens here. This one's like a crimson red, it looks like. I don't know if it'll stand out against that red. It looks like it's almost the same value, but let's see. That's a little bit hard to tell. I need to get some extra light in here, I think. I've moved my lamps back so far so I wouldn't get the glare off the sides, but now it's using a lot of light. Okay, but this looks okay. I can see it a little bit. Let me see if I can get this down a little bit more here. Okay, so I'm not just coloring in the whole leaf. Okay, so we're trying to give some variation to it. So I'm just kind of going over some of the leaves, or part, you know, half of them, you know, half of the side of a couple of them, just to vary it slightly. It makes them look a little bit more dimensional, hopefully. Or that's the idea. Again, it's one of those kind of micro details, you know. And someone may see, someone may not. See all these down here. I mean, I think that looks okay, but it's a little bit flat looking, so kind of going over some of them. It's bringing a little bit of variation into the hue. Values are pretty much the same, or very similar. Okay, let's test out a little bit of an orange, you know, here. This is like a fluorescent orange here. I'm just kind of incorporating it in with some of these trees in a couple areas. Hopefully to kind of make it just shimmer with kind of multi-tonal shapes and areas. Okay, let's take a look. This ledge here is, I think it's becoming kind of the focal point, or yeah, it's the focal point of my attention at least, you know. You would think down there, but I don't know, this near kind of ledge is kind of coming alive with texture and detail and whatnot. Working variations of yellow green, lime green, fluorescent green in this ledge here to form those textures. See that? Adding in this little some grass in between. Maybe some of these areas, maybe not. Okay. Okay, is it time for one of my favorite things to do, which is pigment ink. This is a little bit more of the white gel pen. Uniball Signo. Alright, let's see here. Boy, this seems like a really small applicator here, you know, for such a big piece, but it's a good applicator and quite effective, so I think we'll give it a try. Alright, so Hero Hues, Unicorn White. I think the other ones, they call it Unicorn something, but this one's just called Unicorn, so. Okay, so, as always, if you haven't watched some videos on just the application of this ink, it's basically applying it to the tip, really blotting a lot off so that it becomes more of like a dry brush application of that ink to paper. Alright, so you don't get these big blobs everywhere. Anytime anyone has a tough time with this technique here, it's because we are using too much ink on the tip, so it's like blob, 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 and that's not what we're going after. We're going after kind of a lighter application. So when I say we, I'm talking about me too. Sometimes I just put too much down, and if you do, you just kind of blot it off, and it comes right off, especially if it's a glossy cardstock, and before it dries. Even after it dries, it'll come off glossy, though. So if you want it nice enough fixed, then you have to spray fix it. Like an acrylic spray or workable fixative, or maybe even hairspray or something like that. Okay, so I'm adding it down. Look at that atmosphere starting to kind of creep in, that kind of mist on the edge of the lake, right along the banks. Kind of gives it a little bit more of a kind of a mysterious feel, you know, that fog kind of rolling around, low-lying fog around the forest floor type of thing. kind of oscillate it a little bit, where I have some in some areas, and then I'll kind of have a little bit of it more kind of blank, just so it doesn't look so, you know, absolutely uniform across there. Let's back up. Anyways, this is what's kind of happening right here. It's kind of adding another texture. And I would say it's increasing the depth of a piece by creating kind of a separation of space within the design itself, but also, you know, front to back within here. So if you put fog in here, you're kind of, you know, you're implying something in between you and that object, or within the object itself, by saying that there's this substance in the form of, you know, moisture in the air, and it's being illuminated, so it kind of becomes an integral part of kind of the visual there. And, you know, in doing so, I think it looks a little bit more three-dimensional that way, by creating some extra space within the piece. Kind of back in there, it's kind of misty. And putting it where light meets dark. Up in the top area too, and that will hopefully look like light is landing on some of those trees up top and diffusing them a little bit in terms of the image. When you kind of lighten it up like that, it looks kind of farther back in the distance. It kind of pushes things back. It's less crisp, and it's lighter, softer looking. Okay, let's take a look at the islands right here where they meet. Some of that lightness in the water will kind of diffuse it a little bit, and it hopefully looks like light is hitting it on that part of the island. Little fingerprint up here. It can also hide kind of little smudgies. A little bit too. Here. There you go. So that kind of side of the island that's facing the light, I'll just kind of put a little bit of tone on it like that, or ink, and it knocks down the value of it. So when I dab it off like that, see it right in here, the light is coming from in here, so on this side of the island I add some pigment ink, and to the right of the islands I do it on the left hand side of the island. So how it kind of turns it a little bit. The light is hitting that. Okay. Smash my tip down. I think I'm touching the cardboard of this, this Q-tip now. Let me get some of that cotton back up here. Okay, let's see if that's doing it. I want a nice soft, kind of wide application of pigment inkiness. I'm kind of dabbing it around, kind of like finger painting or something like that, kind of spreading it. Okay. Let's try some of it kind of up here. Okay, I don't have a lot of space where I'll do it, but maybe there's a couple areas where there's a bit of a residual I don't know, fog, you know, kind of trapped in areas from the morning or whatever. Or maybe this is morning, I don't know. Okay, so where have I kind of retained some of that lighter areas? Fairly close to the, you know, the white of the page. I'm adding some right here just because it's in the back of this tree, so adding it down here. This area isn't quite white, but I can get a little bit down without it kind of standing out too much. If you kind of add this in areas that are really dark, sometimes it looks kind of strange because you have this kind of illuminated fog, you know, with light hitting it, but it's in complete darkness. So I don't know, you can do that sometime. You know, I might do it on like a Halloween scene or something like that, where, you know, just in general everything gets a little bit darker anyway. Okay, so this is what it looks like right in here. See, there's this diffusion of those leaves, the light. Look at that. Doesn't it look like it's kind of glowing a little bit more? You know, kind of just by adding in this pigment ink over it in a very thin layer, and then, you know, changing kind of the values of some of the objects around that area of, you know, kind of application. Okay, all right. I think this is about it. All right, final touches. Let's see. I think I can pull out my Versafine and get some really dark impressions for a little bit more dimension. Okay. All right, Versafine. Let's go with this Spruce Tree Large again. Okay. Versafine is black pigment ink, so I usually save this for my kind of last final touches, just because it's going to stay wet for a while. I don't know how long. I usually just leave this my scene's sitting overnight, and they're pretty much set up by the next day. On some papers, on this one it seems to be just fine. Given plenty of time. Okay, let's see if I can show you the difference between, like, say, this print and this print over here. This one's still wet, but you see how it's a little bit darker? So I think it looks a little bit closer to us. I'll go right here. Maybe go a little bit higher. Yeah, maybe I'll just use a little bit of it. Okay. See, there's two down there. It's strange stamping black over black and having the foreground black kind of stand out, decently. Okay, so those dark ones right there. Hopefully adding up to kind of the overall, kind of appearance of the piece. Alright, I think that's enough of that. I'm trying to think if I want any more of the, it's kind of this dead branch. Let's do it. We have a lot of it in the foreground anyway. Let's do it in a much darker tone than the initial impressions. I don't know how much I'll use. I was thinking about one of my smaller blocks, but let's just go with the big one so the whole thing fits. Alright, let's just go for it. I was thinking a really big one might look kind of cool right here. Okay. So kind of down here in the darkness, but putting something really dark right over the top of it. Maybe it might make the kind of what was underneath it look lighter by contrast. I don't know. I think it might. So I think it does. Look at that dark trunk right next to it. I think that is it. That trunk is, or this pine is a leafless pine, is pretty dark. Or it's pretty visible. Let me group it in threes. Sometimes I like to work in kind of odds. So even though there's these other ones in here incorporated in, the darkest ones are very, you know, really black. So maybe go with one more. So that things are kind of in threes. I don't know where I want it. I don't want it right here because it's 1, 2, 3. They're almost like perfectly, you know, spaced. I don't want something so symmetrical. I go a little bit higher. I can go really high. Dare I do that? It's really being bold. Not that 11 by 17 is not bold, but let's just do it. We got the space here. Let's go with a really huge, you know, impression of it. Just allowing the transfer. And making sure I got it all. Yeah, actually that looks pretty good, I'd say, right there. That really tall one. Alright, this piece doesn't lack for texture. Maybe the, you know, just in terms of the sheer amount of it over this gigantic piece. All kinds of things going on in here, but you know, there probably are some tweaks in here that I could do. But I think by and large we are done here. Let's take a closer look here in the foreground. Is that dark leafless pine in there? Coming across right here. Kind of got that glowing fog in here. See, I think that looks, it really stands out to me from the distant, you know, the background here. Those kind of shimmering lights and whatnot. Hopefully it looks nice and kind of three-dimensional in there, helped by the that fog. Okay, and then we have our other zone up there with the island. See that kind of pigment ink with the light on that side of the island being illuminated by the light on the water. Some more of it here. And I put just a little touch of it here. See, this one's more in shadow. This one is like right in the light, so on that little back piece I put a little bit of pigment ink on that one, just to lighten it up a little bit, so there's a little bit more depth in that little tip there. See that right there? Okay, and tops of the trees, pigment ink applied so they were much lighter, right? But over here, it's in the darkness, so I didn't apply any of that pigment ink. So, and again, that kind of fogginess, look at that. I think that kind of recedes back in the distance by putting in that kind of fog back in that cove in there. Alright, so not too small of a scene. Hope you enjoyed it. And I will give this a good day to dry, and then I'll probably come in and spray it. But by and large, the colors are popping pretty good, but they'll be much deeper and richer if I allow this to dry and spray it with a nice clear-coated spray sealant. So, alright, that's the largest scene that I've ever done, and I hope not the last. I don't suspect. I'll probably do something that maybe has less impressions, and I could probably turn around very quickly, especially if I go monochromatic and monotonal. But we'll see. I did like the black and white version of this as well, but I do like all these colors in here and whatnot. in the spirit of, I don't know, my memory of a certain location. Oh, they're in Acadia National Park, so if you've bared with me and you've hung around through all these 3 segments on this scene, thank you so much for watching. And if you have any questions, just drop me a note in the comment section.